West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now, joining me now is the Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He is the former Director of European Affairs on the National Security Council, Senior Advisor to Vote Vets, and the author of an important memoir, Here Right Matters, which details his role as the man who blew the whistle on Donald Trump's shakedown campaign to try and pressure the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, to damage Joe Biden in the run-up to the 2020 election. Colonel, it is good to see you this morning. Thank you for being with us. The conversation has evolved into one of this no-fly zone that member of parliament after member of parliament and the president of Ukraine spoke directly to 300 members of the U.S. Congress yesterday, kept on asking for it. America continues to maintain, and NATO continues to maintain, that that's a non-starter because of how Russia would view that as aggression, as an act of war. What's your take on what has to be done now?
Well, for one thing, we need to start looking past defeatism and this perspective from the government, our own government, that there's not much we can do. That's actually been the call all along. We followed Europe's lead. We followed Zelensky's lead with regards to even the sanctions. The European banks, or Europe went after Russia's central bank. Zelensky prompted Europe to go after SWIFT, and we followed in trail. We are not really leading in this one. What we need to start doing is recognize that we actually do have a role, and the longer this war continues, the greater possibility that we get drawn into this. Everything we've done thus far has been really reluctantly. We've been a reluctant player based on this threat that somehow this could spill over into a broader conflict. It has. There's going to be an economic toll. There's going to be a toll on food supplies around the world. There's going to be a toll within probably the information space. Relations with Russia they're almost non-existent at this point. So we need to start thinking and planning for long term. I wrote an article in Foreign Affairs calling for a Lend-Lease program. This is a concept that we employed in World War II to sustain our European allies, the UK, and actually the Soviet Union in particular, by establishing depots and continuous convoys to make sure that they were supplied for a long campaign. And that's really the way we work our way through this, because Russia launched a very, very poorly conceived plan. Plan A was to rapidly roll into Ukraine, take the cities, and then leave. Plan B is really not all that dissimilar. It's taking massive forces to try to surround Kiev, but leaving their supply lines exposed. Yesterday, they took 9 losses in aircraft. That's massive, the largest amount of aircraft lost probably by any major power since World War II. So we need to start thinking about the long haul, how this is going to be a slog. Plan C probably looks like Russia surrounding Kiev maybe, although probably not successfully because they don't have enough combat power, and then just constantly flowing troops in to put a stranglehold on the city. And this gets drawn out longer and longer, bleeding out the Russian armed forces that are not doing super great. And in that kind of human catastrophe, we get pulled in. It's just that simple. There is no returning to normal. The question is, how do we keep a Cold War from turning into a hot war? And we do this by provisioning the Ukrainians with medium and long-range anti-tank, with air defense capabilities, and with UCAVs, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, to strike deep targets. That's the way we get through this.
So I can't underscore the degree to which you are an expert on this. You were not only the expert on it at the National Security Council, you were in that room where, a precursor to this event took place when Donald Trump tried to deny congressionally approved aid to Ukraine. But you're also from here. You're from Ukraine. I want to read just a little bit from this article that you publish in Foreign Affairs, which I think is a must read. It's what you've been saying, but I want to just put this on the screen so that our viewers can see it. The Kremlin has suffered catastrophic losses in terms of personnel, vehicles, and equipment, but the Russian military has significant reserves to replenish its forces. Meanwhile, Ukraine will run short of fuel, ammunition, anti-tank weapons, air defense systems, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, and aircraft long before its manpower is exhausted or its morale breaks. Western democracies have the necessary resources to close this gap and ensure that Ukraine prevails. So if that's not a no-fly zone, what does that actually look like on the ground? Does it look like Ukrainians having Stinger missiles and javelins to take down aircraft and helicopters and missile batteries?
That's exactly right. So it's not us, not NATO coming in with a no-fly zone. And we have to remember that things that seemed unpalatable 10 days ago are now being discussed. These aircraft that the U.S., from what I understand, may have obstructed from Poland, these Soviet-era aircraft from coming forward, are now there's serious discussions about pushing those forward. Poland, Slovakia, and Bulgaria. So things that seemed unpalatable before are now quite reasonable, and things that will seem unpalatable now a week or 2 weeks from now are going to be necessary. So options are going to narrow, risks are going to increase, but this is not something that really significantly increases risks. The Turks are providing these unmanned combat aerial vehicles. We would provide more of them. So we've broken the code on that one. The Turks are doing it, so a member of NATO is doing it, and it's the Ukrainians using the stuff that we provide them through this Lend-Lease program that could operate it. So it's not direct NATO involvement. It's completely within the bounds of how these things have unfolded in previous wars. We have to remember this is not the first time we're facing off against Russia. And the question is, how do we avoid bilateral confrontation? Russia knocked out our planes in Korea. They were flying planes on behalf of the North Korean forces. They did the same thing in Vietnam. So there are ways to do this that are non-escalatory.
Let me ask you about the pressure on Russia. Many people remember the Cold War. They remember the end of the Cold War. They remember the Russian people's dissatisfaction with how much money, for lack of success, Russia was having in Afghanistan. They remember terrible, terrible standards of living that your own family experienced. It does seem, with all these sanctions and all these companies pulling out, all the shipping companies not doing business there, Visa and MasterCard, it does seem that the Russian people are about to give up all of the gains that they have had since the end of the Cold War.
Absolutely. This is going to be a reversal to the depths of the Cold War, where the Soviet Union was isolated from the financial institutions, from media. There is no such thing as free press. We went from an autarky, which had some artifacts of democracy, to an outright tyrannical dictatorship. There is no semblance of freedom. The laws that are being passed right now, where if somebody steps out of line and says anything critical about the war, they can be sent to the front. Those are the kinds of draconian tactics that the governments are using. But right now we're seeing relatively small protests. These are what I would call political protests that against the war. When we turn to socio-economic protests, when people can't feed their families because of the activities of Vladimir Putin, food's not coming in to a certain extent, although it's a breadbasket of itself. They have a lot of wheat supplies, but none of the comforts that they've enjoyed for the past 30 years. When those start to fall away, when the security services stop getting paid, that's when you start getting major unrest. And the body bags coming back from Ukraine, that's going to have a multiplier effect. It's going to be 11,000 Russian soldiers have died. That's a tragic, enormous number of Russian soldiers that were fed in as cannon fodder. And there's only more coming based on the battle plans that are unfolding. I mean, these are not, it doesn't take a deep, read of the intelligence, which I don't have access to. You could just see the facts unfold on the ground, and it's crystal clear how the Russians are operating, what kind of directions they've gotten from their political leadership, from Putin and so forth. It's going to be a catastrophe.
It is Monday, the 7th of March of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Oh my, what a weekend, huh? Yikes. I am sorry to say that I may have offended some listeners to the point where I don't think they're listening anymore. In that it might have been perceived that I'm pro-war and, all of that. That is not the case. I am absolutely against war. I am absolutely against the use of violence. But, here comes the but. But I will only take getting slapped in the face twice, okay? I'll turn the cheek, but once you go for the third punch, I'm going to counter. I'm sorry. And that's essentially what is happening in the world. Vladimir Putin has pushed us to the brink, where even the pacifist is deciding, well, it's about time to counterpunch these idiots. The idea is not to get to the point where you have to counterpunch, all right? Only as much force as is necessary. Walk away rather than resist. Resist rather than fight. Okay? I don't want to get to the point where we have to fight. That's the whole point. Resisting might be considered fighting, I know. But why don't we use their energy and redirect it away from us, as in Aikido? Which I have to say, it doesn't take much to figure out how to counter in the use of Aikido. Yeah, push that guy right over there and then, come back up and slap him in the face. Or elsewhere. Push their shoulders. So I am not advocating that we use jets with U.S. fighter pilots and getting into a hot war over Ukraine. I am absolutely against that. I understand why the Ukrainians need some air power. They need to have a no-fly zone, meaning they need to stop the Russian Air Force from bombing these cities. As a start. I understand that. I also understand that we do that, it escalates it. But we also need to recognize that Vladimir Putin declared war on us, well, us being the world. If merely calling what he is doing is a war or an invasion warrants a 15-year prison sentence, what else is Vlad going to use as an excuse? They've already put out a list of all the nations that have gone against Russia in this, what is it called? A military effort? Something? I can't. Exercise? Whatever it is. This war. The Russian embassy threatened people on Twitter, and Twitter still allows them to do that. Absolutely said they're keeping a list of people that have been, dissing Russia and, hey, I say denazify Russia. How do you like them apples, huh? Or beets. So I do apologize if it was misconstrued that I am advocating a hot war. I am not. I am trying to stop it from becoming a hot war. And we could have done that quite a while ago. I mean, we could have done it when the first aspects of Russian democracy, the birth pangs of it, were, strangled in the bassinet. What was that? Well, we could have spoke up when Vlad started messing around with the judiciary. We could have said something. I mean, we do it with Malaysia. So I know it's wrong to go back over the stuff and the should-haves and the could-haves, but listen, I'm tired of saying I told you so. And now it's being construed that I'm an advocate of war. I don't know. I could be misconstruing why we've lost some people. And it could just be that times are tough. Information overload, etc., etc., etc. I understand that. But we are in perilous times. And Netroots Radio began as a form of resistance against what we saw over 10 years ago, almost 11 now, was the hostile takeover of the United States and now representative democracy worldwide by dark forces. It's a reason why they call it dark money. It's a reason why we are unable to identify them, why they're not required to be identified. I mean, they come right out and say it. If people knew what we were doing, they'd be mad at us, and, then our safety would be in peril. Well, every nun I had and every priest I knew said, well, if you wouldn't have to be going through all those efforts if what you were doing was righteous. Okay. Of course, I know lots of righteous folk who, were killed. Alan Berg being one. Remember him? Jewish outspoken radio personality in Colorado or, the Midwest there, the western part, whatever. The Order, the neo-Nazis put a hit on him and they killed him. His cause was righteous, but he didn't have to lie about it. Didn't have to go through all sorts of efforts to justify the righteousness. All he did was open his mouth. So, here we are. Is Vladimir Putin a madman? Or is he calculating and reasonable? He just has no feelings for those who, might coincidentally fall out of a 5-story window. Just might coincidentally be mugged in the foyer of their apartment building. Just might coincidentally have a heart attack. Just might coincidentally be mugged across the street from the Kremlin. Just might coincidentally be poisoned by Novichok. You get calloused after a while, Maybe your first one is... Probably his first one was back during the KGB days. Yeah. So, Trump could not win a second term, so he would make it easier on Vlad, and we all know that. And now, I love how all of these Republicans who forget why Trump was impeached are now backing Ukraine. They act like they've always had Ukraine's back when they fought actively to sabotage Ukraine, to the point of bringing back the corrupt premier or president that they had that got voted out. Trump was actively working with Vladimir Putin and the Russians when the GOP platform was mysteriously rewritten. And what was it rewritten for? Taking aid away from Ukraine so Russia could take it over. Why was he impeached? Because Colonel Vindman gave up the goods that the guy was trying to shake down Zelensky. All right. We are in probably a hot war. okay? Just because it's asymmetrical and we don't have bombs falling on us, the incendiary kind, because we do have bombs falling on us, and that's the hacking of our infrastructure and anything else. Vladimir Putin declared war on us. And now there are active participants helping Vladimir Putin. Actually going into Congress and saying, we don't need to, give any aid to Ukraine. Why would you do that? I want to know what the betting pool is on who's going to be celebrating the 4th of July in Moscow this year. It seems to be a destination on the 4th of July. Independence Day. Talk about a slap in the face. Jeez. Jane Fonda is still pilloried for sitting on a tank in Vietnam, a Viet Cong tank in Vietnam back in the day. She's still being pilloried for it, and she apologized. These Russian sympathizers double down, triple down. You can't say war in Russia, and you can't say gay in Florida. All right. We here at Netroots Radio are doing our small part. We are not advocating for violent war. But I got to tell you, if we don't do something, violent war will be upon us. Okay. On that cheery note, how are ya? Well, we're doing just fine here. Yes, and we do have a curated show, as we do every Monday through Friday when we do West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Open the doors. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? Well, of course, as we began at the top, Putin is taking Russia back to the depths of the Cold War, as Colonel Vindman so aptly described. On the rest of the menu, as we begin here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, by the way. Housing advocates seek funding to repeal a California law that keeps black families out of white neighborhoods. You didn't know that existed, did you? It's even part of the Constitution. And you know how hard it is to change the California Constitution? They just keep adding amendments. You wouldn't believe how weighty it is. It is, too. A contractor defaulted on a contract to build a $12.3 million bridge replacement on Interstate 40 in North Carolina. I'm curious about why that is, but we'll find out, or we won't. But at least we know that they did default. And WNBA players would not have to play overseas during the offseason and then become pawns in geopolitics if they were paid more here in the States. Wouldn't that be nice? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where an international anti-money-laundering body put the United Arab Emirates on its global gray list. And Denmark will boost its defense spending in response to the invasion of Ukraine while phasing out Russian gas. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page there at our homepage at netrootsradio.com, near the bottom of the homepage, is the link to our Patreon page. And as I alluded to earlier, well, sort of alluded to, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, I cannot tell you how much it helps. We are not a media powerhouse when it comes to, well, I don't know, having a market share on the New York Stock Exchange. No, that's not us. All right. We operate on a very thin thread that comes mostly out of our own wallets. So we do need help. All right. And it seems that the tough times have caught up with quite a few people all at once. So we make these appeals Monday through Friday here, and some interstitials during the broadcast on Netroots Radio during the day for funds from you, because we would be unable to do this without you. Your generosity allows us to pay our bills, and I got to tell you, they keep increasing. It's not like, the petrol companies who want to gouge you during times of woe, but costs keep going up even in peaceful times. And I know it's tough for people out there. So when and if you can, we could use the help. I'm just being frank here. So an espresso-type coffee drink, the equivalent of that sent to us once a month, really, really does help. So thank you for your generosity, and thank you for potentially being generous in the future. We have no intention of leaving. It looks like the perils in the world will continue, and that gives us impetus to continue. So thank you. And of course, Netroots Radio is not this show. All right. This is, a salon. We like to hash it out, so to speak, especially on River City Hash Mondays. And what our solutions are really conjecture for the most part, because we do have programming throughout the day where you can find the solutions to many, many problems. And part of the solution is knowing what the problem is. So we hope that we can at least address the problem and point folks in the right direction on how to find out how to, fix it. We need some fixing around here in this world. Why do people keep trying to break it on purpose? I don't know. Anyway, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Of course, as you know, the show notes and links is where you can find the real reportage, and that's very important, of course. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. And the deep archive of not only West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, though that actual link on the show notes and links diary goes right to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but you can find the Netroots Radio library, the deep archive from almost 11 years of continuous 24/7, 365 broadcasting. You can find the Netroots Radio library of shows at the Internet Archive at archive.org. So check it out. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, as we begin here, is out of the Associated Press by Adam Beam. California lawmakers are trying again to get rid of the nation's only law that lets voters veto public housing projects. Not in my backyard. A provision added to the state constitution in 1950 to keep black families out of white neighborhoods. Most everyone in the Capitol agrees the provision should be repealed, both for its racist roots and because it makes it much harder to build affordable housing in a state where the median price for a single-family home is nearly $800,000. And remember what a single-family home is. 2-bedroom, 1 bath, barely 1,000 square feet, if you're lucky. More like 810. Yes. While the state legislature can pass and repeal laws, it cannot change the Constitution unless voters also approve it. Do you know that there's still fishing laws from 1880s in the California state Constitution? It doesn't apply to anyone. That's how impossible it is to take something out of the California Constitution. It's much easier just to keep adding to it than to take out, laws that have no bearing on today. Just saying. Let's see. Putting a proposal on the ballot is pointless unless it is accompanied by a statewide campaign aimed at persuading people to vote for it. Those campaigns can cost $20 million or more, because California has some of the nation's most expensive media markets. I wonder why it's so expensive. California has a media market, therefore media has to be expensive. Who makes it expensive now? Isn't there something about the public trust to be able to broadcast on the nation's airwaves? And that what I would say would include fiber optics and Wi-Fi. Just saying. Okay. It's not the type of ballot measure that automatically draws in money because people don't want affordable housing in their neighborhood because it'll bring in those people. Come on. Not in my backyard. I think that whole thing, no, we can't say that concept of, having preeminence in your little abode and, I don't know, some sort of zone outside of your abode for you to feel safe, that you just don't want those people moving in. So it's like your castle and your moat and everything else that comes with it. Yikes. I don't think that started here in California. Now, of course, I'm in Oregon. So what am I saying here in California? Because I lived in California for the majority of my life. Yes, I did. And I'm not too far from it either. About half an hour away. So anyway, it didn't start there. It didn't even start with the Romans. I think it started before that. Anyway, not in my backyard. Those people. Yeah, so it's not going to automatically draw in money except for those who believe in representative democracy, equal protection, due process for all, and all boats rise when the waters of travail and turmoil keep flooding in. Support in the legislature is not a problem, as a proposed repeal passed the state Senate 37-0 earlier this year. But public support is another matter and carries a big risk, because that's when you find out how many races are out there. And why do I say racism? Because affordable housing always conjures up images of, yes, those people. You know what? Those people are us. What are you so afraid of? Jeez. In 2020, with support for racial justice causes soaring in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, backers spent more than $22 million on a campaign to change the California Constitution so public universities could consider a person's race when deciding who to admit. They failed, with 57% of voters voting no, despite opponents spending only $1.7 million, because, hey, getting someone to be racist is cheap. You don't have to spend very much money to get a person to express their most deep-seated racist roots, does it? Once a campaign fails, it often takes years for supporters to muster enough support to try again. The last time supporters tried to repeal California's affordable housing law was nearly 3 decades ago in 1993, and I remember that like it was only yesterday. And it failed with only 40% voting in favor. Not in my backyard. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A contractor has defaulted on a contract to build a $12.3 million bridge replacement on Interstate 40 in North Carolina, a state agency said. I bet it's the Department of Transportation. Oh, indeed it is. The North Carolina Department of Transportation said in a news release that it terminated its contract with, mark your notebooks here, National Bridge Builders, LLC of Kernersville over several issues, including, quote, its failure to resolve payment issues and provide sufficient labor and equipment to complete the job, end quote. News outlets report that the North Carolina Department of Transportation said National Bridge completed about 55% of the bridge work and was paid $7.1 million. Sounds like more than half. The bridge, part of the Sugar Hill Road in McDowell County, will pass over I-40. Construction began on the project in July of 2019 with an original completion date of this month. The Asheville Citizen-Times reported it was unable to reach officials with National Bridge Builders for comment because they're either back in Russia or, I don't know, they're mobsters and they're gone back to Philly, or I don't know. Where do they go? NC DOT requires contracts to have a bonding company in case the agency is forced to terminate a contractor's right to work on a project. In this instance, a bonding company is now responsible for the project, and no construction activity will occur until a new contractor is hired to take over the job, which is expected to occur later this year. Feinberg of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Russia has been a popular destination for WNBA players like Brittany Griner over the past 2 decades because of the money they can make there playing in the winter, with top players earning more than $1 million, nearly quadruple what they can make as a base salary in the WNBA. Griner, Brianna Stewart, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, and Jonquel Jones have been willing to spend their offseason playing far from home. It's tough for WNBA players to turn down that kind of money, despite safety concerns and politics in some of the countries where they play. The 31-year-old Griner, a 7-time All-Star for the Phoenix Mercury, has played in Russia since 2014. She was returning from a break for the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup qualifying tournaments when she was arrested at an airport near Moscow last month after Russian authorities said a search of her luggage revealed vape cartridges. on Saturday. The State Department issued a do-not-travel advisory for Russia because of its invasion of Ukraine and urged all citizens to depart immediately, citing factors including, quote, the potential for harassment against U.S. citizens by Russian government security officials and the embassy's limited ability to assist Americans in Russia, end quote. Turkey, Australia, China, and France also have strong women's basketball domestic leagues where some of the WNBA's best play in their offseason. Russian sports leagues have been able to pay top players those high salaries because some of the teams are funded by government municipalities while others are owned by oligarchs who care more about winning championships and trophies than being profitable. There are stories of Russian owners putting up players in luxury accommodations and taking them on shopping sprees and buying them expensive gifts in addition to paying their salaries. The Russian league has a completely different financial structure from the WNBA, where there is a salary cap players union and collective bargaining agreement. The WNBA has made strides to increase players' salaries and find other ways to compensate players in the last CBA, which was ratified in 2020. The contract, which runs through 2027, pays players on average $130,000, with the top stars able to earn more than $500,000 through salary, marketing agreements, and an in-season tournament and bonuses. The CBA also provides full salaries while players are on maternity leave, enhanced family benefits, travel standards, and other health and wellness improvements. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Mighty Pen. There have been lots of adaptations of the French play Cyrano de Bergerac since its debut in 1897. Many of them, including the 80s vintage Roxanne, have focused on the comedy and downplayed the tragedy. However, in this latest musical adaptation by Joe Wright, there is no mistake that at its core, Cyrano is a tragedy about the loss of love, life, and most of all, opportunity. Filmed in the dazzling Italian Mediterranean, the story is that of the silver-tongued soldier Cyrano, played by Peter Dinklage, who has harbored a years-long crush on Roxanne, whom he had met earlier in their hometown. Roxanne, who sees Cyrano as her closest friend, has no idea of his love for her. She is aware, however, that she's the object of desire by an older duke, Ben Mendelsohn, and a dashing soldier from Cyrano's regiment named Christian. Roxanne is attracted to Christian, who has the looks, but not the words, to win Roxanne's heart. Cyrano, who feels that his dwarfism makes him unworthy, comes up with a solution. He'll write letters designed to capture Roxanne's heart, while Christian provides the visuals. As Cyrano puts it, the two of them will be the perfect man. This plan is as fraught as you might imagine, and the upset spurned Duke's involvement only adds to the complication. As it turns out, he is both Cyrano and Christian's military superior, and can command the two of them go to the front lines in a current conflict. You know, where one or both might not come back. A wonderful screenplay from Erica Schmidt from her 2018 stage adaptation, sharp directing from Wright, and a score by members of the band The National make this one a treat, worthy of more awards attention than it's gotten. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Good eating habits developed in childhood can last a lifetime, but getting children to eat their fruits and vegetables is a common problem. Eating them adds important nutrients, helps control weight, and reduces the risks for many serious illnesses. Children in the U.S. are eating more fruit. However, 60% of children get fewer fruits than recommended, and 93% don't get enough vegetables. Childcare, schools, and school districts can help change this by meeting or exceeding federal nutrition standards for meals and snacks, including fruits and vegetables wherever food is offered, and helping children learn about and taste fruits and vegetables. At home, parents can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables with their children and provide them as snacks, even if it takes many tries. Also, parents can include their children when shopping for, growing, and preparing fruits and vegetables. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Ona Judge was born into slavery at Mount Vernon, Virginia, around 1774. Her mother was an enslaved seamstress to Martha Washington, and when she was old enough, Ona was also pressed into service as one of Martha's most trusted housemaids. As a housemaid, she was spared the back-breaking labor many enslaved women were forced to endure in the fields. However, she was enslaved and did not even have the modest liberties that free African-American women enjoyed. When she learned that Martha Washington intended to give her away to Martha's bad-tempered granddaughter as a wedding present, Ona fled the president's house in Philadelphia, eventually making her way to safety in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where she eventually married and had children. The Washingtons were frustrated by Ona's escape, with George Washington making persistent efforts to return Ona to Mount Vernon, instructing Martha's nephew to take Ona by force and carry her back if she refused. Ona did refuse and eluded her would-be kidnappers, remaining free for the rest of her life and giving at least 2 interviews to abolitionist newspapers. This has been 60 Second Civics, a podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage.
Are you, am I, are we putting democracy at risk? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. According to a recent Washington Post poll, 70% of Republicans believe that the 2020 presidential election was illegitimate. Wow. 70% of the people who identify with one of the 2 major political parties in America subscribe to a falsehood, a lie? How is this possible? Here's one explanation. 82% of Fox News viewers believe the election was stolen. 82%. For viewers of the ultra-far-right news distributors, it's closer to 100%. Many media analysts believe that those numbers result from people living in news silos, a phenomenon that happens among people of different political persuasions and personal beliefs. News silos. Many viewers and listeners turning to media that reinforces their existing opinions and ideas. Those media outlets then deliver content that over and over again reinforces those ideas. This phenomenon is dangerous. In order for facts to prevail over prevarications, we as a nation depend on ourselves, the body politic, to participate collectively in what we call a free marketplace of ideas. But as that marketplace becomes more like a series of company-owned stores, as news silos become more the norm, democracy increasingly is put at grave risk. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932, forever remembered as a tragic day. The nation was in the grip of the Great Depression. As the economy languished, car sales plummeted by 80%. Thousands in Detroit found themselves out of work. Bread lines in the city grew longer with each passing day. The city's unemployed council and the United Auto Workers came together to discuss a response to the crisis. They decided to organize a march to the Ford River Rouge plant. At that time, Henry Ford was one of the wealthiest people in the world. The crowd of as many as 5,000 workers assembled at the city's edge. They had with them a list of 14 demands, including a return to work, the right to unionize, and an end to discrimination in hiring. As the marchers reached the Dearborn, Michigan auto plant site, they were greeted with tear gas shot by police and company security forces. Some of the workers responded by throwing dirt clods and rocks. The police retreated, then regrouped to aim fire hoses at the demonstrators. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire filled the air, and in a hail of bullets, 4 marchers fell dead. A 5th later died from his wounds. The Ford March had turned into a bloody massacre. More than 60,000 marched in the funeral procession for the slain workers who lie in solidarity buried together. The 5th, Curtis Williams, an African-American, was refused burial in the city's segregated cemetery. The workers hired an airplane and spread his ashes over the Ford plant. The sacrifice of these men have not been forgotten. Over the next decade, the auto industry became one of the strongholds of U.S. labor organizing, helping to raise the living standards of all workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit under foggy conditions with, well, we're expecting a high of about 63 degrees later on with a mix of clouds and sun. Partly cloudy tonight with lows in the low 30s, winds light and variable today and tonight, and also tomorrow with partly cloudy conditions, highs about 58. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County continue to rise, even though we're going to take off our masks in just a few days. Not me. Our confirmed cases now have increased and stand at 421,096, and deceased have increased also and stand at 486, with an increase when we get the updated totals probably late tomorrow. Pollen is rated as none outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is good for the region at 32 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is in the moderate range at level 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.58 inches. Visibility is less than half a mile, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 44 and sunny. Paris is 44 and sunny. Rome is 52 and partly cloudy with a chance of rain, heavy rain apparently, with a warning. Kyiv is 32 and cloudy. Kabul, maybe that'll keep the bomb runs at bay. We'll see. Kabul is 43 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 61 and clear. Tokyo is 46 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees with heavy rain. San Francisco, California is 46 degrees and sunny. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. John Gambrell of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A global body focused on fighting money laundering has placed the United Arab Emirates on its so-called gray list over concerns that the global trade hub is not doing enough to stop criminals and militants from hiding wealth there. The decision on late Friday night by the Paris-based Financial Action Task Force puts the UAE, home to Dubai and oil-rich Abu Dhabi, on a list of 23 countries, including fellow Mid-East nations Jordan, Syria, and Yemen. While not expected to dent business in the Emirates, a federation of 7 sheikdoms on the Arabian Peninsula, home to a multitude of economic free zones and real estate ventures, it could strike at the country's carefully managed, business-friendly image. Ratings agencies and other financial institutions also consider such a listing as a risk, which can affect interest rates or loans. While praising the UAE's significant progress, the body known as FATF, or FATF, said more needed to be done. Already, the UAE has established a corporate registry and signed extradition agreements with other nations. However, the UAE long has been known as a place where bags of cash, diamonds, gold, and other valuables can be moved into and through. In recent years, the State Department has described bulk cash smuggling as a significant problem in the Emirates, and no wonder Trump and all the rest of his crew put their money there.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Denmark will significantly increase its defense budget and aim to become independent of Russian natural gas in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said yesterday, Sunday. The Nordic country will increase its defense spending gradually to reach 2% of GDP by 2033, equivalent to an increase in annual defense spending of around $2.65 billion U.S. under an agreement between the main parliamentary bodies. The parties also agreed to set aside 7 billion crowns. So what would that be? Something a little less than $1.25 billion U.S. over the next 2 years to strengthen Danish defense diplomacy and humanitarian efforts. Denmark, a NATO member, agreed in 2019 to increase military spending, but had been under pressure from the U.S. to reach the NATO target of 2% when they had been only targeting 1.35. Germany said last week that it would sharply increase its spending on defense and quickly reduce its dependence on Russian energy. Ukraine's struggle is not just Ukraine's. It is a test of strength for everything we believe in, our values, democracy, human rights, peace, and freedom, the Danish Prime Minister Frederiksen said. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Terry Townshouter Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.